Thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Aaron Porras, here with ILTV's Morning Briefing. The European Union is raising its voice against Israel in not one but two major cases. 8 EU countries are demanding Israel reimburse them for destroying West Bank structures the state deemed illegal. And on top of that, the European Union has just harshly condemned Israel, alleging Israel is threatening peace by approving new Jewish homes in the disputed West Bank. The Israeli government has been ramping up its settlement policy in the West Bank lately, recently approving over 2,000 new homes in less than a week. That includes the first new Jewish houses in the city of Hebron in 15 years. The European Union is now taking to the world stage, calling this new construction illegal under international law, and warning that by continuing to infringe on disputed lands, Israel is destroying any possibility for a two-state solution with the Palestinians. A delegation of 8 EU nations has already made an unprecedented demand on a second controversial Israeli policy too, the state's demolition of Palestinian structures in the West Bank. These buildings include makeshift classrooms, solar panels, and even housing for Palestinians and Bedouins in Area C of the West Bank. But lacking the proper permits, Israel considers them illegal and continues to demolish them on a regular basis. Foreign nations often donate money to help build these structures though, which is why 8 EU nations, including Belgium, France, Spain, and Luxembourg, are now demanding Israel write them a check for every structure the army destroyed. This is a controversial request though, considering the structures in question are reported to be lacking the required permits, but it's Israeli bureaucracy that grants the approval in the first place. Needless to say, the EU isn't hesitating to condemn Israel when it sees fit. With Palestinian reconciliation becoming a very real possibility, Israel has already demanded Hamas renounce all violence before it's willing to recognize that new unity. Now the United States has just echoed those words, officially demanding the Palestinians drop violence completely and recognize Israel's right to exist. The White House's Middle East peace envoy Jason Greenblatt has made America's position extremely clear, saying, quote, "Any Palestinian government must unambiguously and explicitly commit to nonviolence, recognize the State of Israel, accept previous agreements and obligations between the parties, including to disarm terrorists, and commit to peaceful negotiations," end quote. This is along the same lines of Israel's official statement just yesterday, pledging that Israel wouldn't negotiate with the Palestinian Authority supported by Hamas's violence. Though the rivaling Palestinian factions signed a historic reconciliation deal, one issue still unresolved is the fate of Hamas's massive 25,000-soldier army, which Hamas has refused to give up. Though Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has promised Hamas's army will not be allowed under any unity deal, many worry that Hamas would evolve into a Hezbollah-like entity, independent to act on its own, but still part of the overall government. This is a sticking point likely to only become more and more crucial as time goes on, especially now that the United States is standing behind Israel's position. It seems that the Inter-Parliamentary Union, or I.P.U, has become yet another stomping ground for international anti-Israel bias to spread its wings. At the 137th I.P.U meeting held last night in St. Petersburg, Russia, the representative from Kuwait, Marzouk Al-Ghanim, used his time on the plenum floor to hurl unfounded insults at the Israeli delegation. He first called the Israeli parliament, quote, "the most dangerous type of terrorist," end quote, in that he claims the Israeli government is a state sponsor to terrorism. He then went on to demand that Knesset member Nachman Shai leave the room, calling the Knesset head a child murderer. His comments garnered applause from the floor, and if that wasn't bad enough, to add insult to injury, the Israeli delegation headed by Knesset member Sharon Eskel from the Likud party was then not given the ability to rebut the Kuwaiti parliament speaker's slanderous diatribe. The chairman of the I.P.U simply shut off Eskel's microphone, and it was at this time that the Israeli delegation picked up and left. The Inter-Parliamentary Union, which Israel regularly participates in as a member state, is an overarching organization defined by the mission to, quote, "promote dialogue between members of parliaments in order to promote the goals of peace and cooperation between the nations," end quote. Unfortunately, it looks like these days the I.P.U is not meeting its own stated goals. A United States-based firm has just announced that it will at least be trying to alleviate the horrendous power situation in Gaza. Despite the ongoing reconciliation talks between Hamas in Gaza and Fatah in the West Bank, the situation on the ground in Gaza has not improved for the average Palestinian citizen. The coastal strip is still subject to a devastating power deficit as part of what could only be described as a humanitarian crisis. Gaza currently requires an estimated 600 megawatts of electricity per day, but between the power provided by Egypt and Israel and the single operating electricity plant in Gaza, the Strip only receives 165. Now though, with the help of a project called Turn on the Lights in Gaza, 3 solar fields will be installed and will be producing as much as 40 megawatts of power per day by April. It isn't enough to solve the issue, but it is enough to help relieve some of the stresses on the power grid and provide emergency electricity to essential service centers like hospitals. The investment will require about 50 million euros, with the first shipment of panels arriving in March through the port of Ashdod. The World Medical Association, or the W.M.A., is charged with promoting the highest possible standards of medical care, ethical behavior by physicians, and human rights with respect to healthcare, namely advocating that access to healthcare is a human right. Well now, starting next year, Israel Medical Association Chairman Professor Leonid Edelman will serve as the WMA's new president. The WMA, with over 9 million members worldwide, held their election in Chicago last weekend, where Edelman, who served in several other positions on the WMA Council in the past, received over 2/3 of the vote. After the election, Professor Edelman made note that with all the international organizations currently perceived as being biased against Israel, quote, "It is important that an Israeli physician is chosen for the most prestigious position in the medical world and have an influence on the most important decisions regarding doctors' rules of conduct, medical ethics, and more," end quote. Edelman is an expert in intensive care and anesthesiology. He's also the head of the anesthesiology department in the Rabin Medical Center's Beilinson campus in Petah Tikva. That's all for now. I'm Aaron Porras, and see you later with our main daily broadcast from Israel at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.